Right, so we will continue with the topic that was taboo in the last talk. That is money. But we will first start with a question. How many of you actually enjoy vacuuming your house? Oh, there are quite a few. But how about going to the dentist? Less, but still almost the same amount. But why I'm asking these strange questions is that actually most people would rather clean their home, and a third would rather visit the dentist than sit down to get their finances in order. And our own study in Estonia showed that 40% not only have never looked at how much they have saved for retirement, but they never even want to see. Why is this so? My research tries to provide answers to such questions, particularly when it comes to debt and retirement. Together with colleagues, we design studies that seek out the factors that influence the decisions people make with their money. And today, I would like to focus on three such aspects. There is the knowledge and understanding of finance, then the attitudes of money, and finally, why good behavior doesn't always lead, why good knowledge doesn't always lead to behavior. So let's start with knowledge. If you read the papers a few months ago, you may have come across this story about the person who took out a payment holiday for 10 years. So a 10-year holiday is basically an agreement where you do not have to pay the principal of a loan for a set period of time. Usually this period is just a few months, but in this case it was 10 years. Now importantly, interest payments still continue during this time. And this is exactly what happened. They paid their monthly payment for years and years, but after all of this, their debt had not decreased at all. So this is a knowledge problem, and it's understandable, because some of these financial decisions can get really complicated. With a payment holiday, your monthly payment goes down, but the total cost of credit can actually increase by quite a lot. Here there was actually a happy ending because their debt was forgiven, but most stories do not end up this way. Our research has shown that people can lack even a fundamental understanding of what debt is. So let's take the case of installment purchases. There you agree to buy something on credit by paying for it over 4 or 5 years. But people often do not see this as debt, but rather just as buying. But when you look at the interest rates, then these loans actually have interest rates of 20% or more per year, which means that you are actually paying more than 60% of the sticker price for the item. Since people don't think of this as borrowing, then they can easily overspend, overborrow, and also it's much harder to help them get rid of their debt if they don't know how much they owe. And now you might be thinking, okay, so I see that the problem is high interest rate, but I have a 0% interest loan. That must be fine, right? Well, you are correct that these types of loans exist, and indeed they have a 0% interest rate, and you have to pay back in 3 equal parts, usually. And as any good economist will likely tell you, getting a 0% loan is a great deal. Well, because you can use that money to make even more money, and money loses value anyway due to inflation. The trouble is that people don't have just one of these loans, but they have 3 or 5 or maybe even more. And what happens then is that these really pile up. If they pile up, then they start straining the budget, and if you cannot afford to make these payments anymore, well, that is when these loans get really expensive. So that is not to say that you should never borrow or that all debt is bad. That's definitely not so. But rather my point is that these decisions need to be carefully considered through. This brings us to attitudes towards money. And in work done by Johan Almenberg and colleagues, they show that attitudes towards debt matter a lot. Some people might feel uncomfortable with debt, and they actually borrow less than their income would allow. Our study mirrors this in Estonia by showing that it's not so much that people can calculate compound interest or they know what APR stands for, but it's rather how they feel about money. And some people feel that life is more carefree when you have loans. And maybe so, because, well, you have a bigger TV, you have a nicer car, but you also have more debt. But for some people, this is a worthwhile trade-off. This shows that there's much more to financial behavior than knowledge alone. And a good example of this comes from the OECD survey of financial literacy. They understand financial literacy through 3 main pillars, the same that we have talked about today: knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. The interesting thing is that Estonia consistently ranks as one of the top countries in financial knowledge. But when it comes to financial behavior, we are actually below average. This means that people can have really good knowledge and understanding of finance, but still neglect their retirement savings and have needed to borrow to cover everyday living costs, showing poor financial planning. Why is this so? Well, there's a lot more factors than I can talk in this just single session. But I would like to focus on one aspect, and that is how we learn about finance differs from the real world. Most of us get our financial education in the math class. This means that the teacher gives you an assignment and you have to find the precise answer to this interest question. You're probably in a largely quiet classroom and the teacher can help you if you cannot find the right answer. So it's essentially a math exercise. But in the real world, you're probably short of time, you really want to buy a new thing, you're probably in a noisy supermarket, or you have 10 tabs open on your device that all require your attention. So it doesn't really feel like you can just take your time and calculate the interest on these loans. And of course, companies know this really well. And if you look at how credit is offered online, then you can see that the monthly payment is given in large, bold letters because it seems so cheap. Of course, you can afford the laptop if it only costs 40 euros a month. But as we talked before, these installment purchases are actually expensive loans. It's just made to seem that way, because if you are rushing and you don't think of this as math, then you probably won't see how much it will actually cost. So where does this leave us? Does it mean that you just have to brush up on your financial terminology and have a positive attitude towards money? Well, it's not so easy. I can't really be the one to tell you whether a 1% reduction in interest rate is necessarily better than having quicker access to credit. That you have to decide for yourself. Likewise, probably people who are barely getting by financially shouldn't be trying to save the maximum amount for retirement because they have more pressing financial concerns. At the same time, there's lots of people who earn a really good income but still completely neglect saving. But one thing I think everybody can do is to be more informed about your finances. That starts with making a budget to know where the money is going. But also don't forget about your debt situation, because you can actually save quite a lot of money by trying to pay off high interest debt early. And don't forget about retirement savings. It's now easier than ever to check if everything is going according to plan through your mobile banking app. But as we have talked about today, knowledge is just half of the battle. It's good, but you need more. So now you should also start doing and establishing habits. I know it can be tedious, but so is cleaning your home or doing the dishes. So next time, tidy up your finances as well. Thanks.